that the text first started whispering to me more powerfully in this way as I marched into the halls of power during that Trump era. I would come home from a rally or a protest or an action, whether here in Atlanta or there, and there would be some text resonating in my brain. So I'd have to get a burger and shake, because that's my tradition after really hard work. And then I would go back to my computer and I would Google the Bible verse. Sometimes it would be just a word like remember you were once. And I would have to do my little exegesis, on the computer and try to figure out why is God putting this verse in my head like this. Most of us weren't taught to read the Bible in that way. I can tell just from worshiping with you this morning that you all are taught to read the Bible in that way. But some of us may still have from our childhood this idea that it's a bunch of rules that you really need to obey, or maybe even kind of like a roadmap to avoid hell, something like that. My Baptist friends really struggle with that. Maybe an intellectual puzzle to put together. But there's this ancient practice called Lectio Divina, the divine reading, and I know some of you have done that. And that's what I have chosen to use today in writing this book and in my life, to read the Bible slowly and prayerfully, to imagine stepping into the story, imagine being one of the characters, imagine having a conversation with the characters, invite them into your life today, and say, what would you do? What would you do if you were living in these times and immigrant students were about to be deported from our city? What would you do, Shipra and Pua? I think they would tell us a thing or two, wouldn't they? They would tell us about the power of humor, for one thing, the power of deviousness, for another. Stories like Exodus and Genesis are not ancient myths to be put on the shelf or entertained. They are actual roadmaps for resistance. But to see their power clearly, we have to also know what we're up against. 2 years ago, I pulled into a parking lot of a Pentecostal church in Batavia, which is right outside Rochester. I was there to observe the Reawaken America tour. It's a Christian nationalist rally that is sweeping the nation. The first thing that I saw, signs along the driveway up to the revival tent that said, no guns, no knives. Multiple signs. I had never seen signs like that outside a church. And then came the bus. On the side was printed Patriot, Street Fighter, and a man in tactical gear was painted on there, gripping a bludgeon, with the words across the chest plate that read, get in the fight. This was not a revival. It was a war rally wrapped in Christian symbolism. Inside were nearly 3,000 people, shoulder to shoulder, and they were cheering Michael Flynn and Roger Stone. From the stage came apocalyptic rhetoric, persecution narratives, conspiracy theories, targeting immigrants, LGBTQ people, liberals, President Biden, the Attorney General of the state of New York, and fellow Christians. I was with a tall male colleague, but I still removed my clerical collar, which I had on that day. I kept my cross on because it meant something different to me than it did to them. And interestingly enough, it gave me a pass. I got in without anyone knowing who I truly was and why I was truly there. What I witnessed, of course, is not Christianity, it's a political movement cloaked in Christian language, and it's growing. 3 in 10 Americans are purported to subscribe to Christian nationalism. We saw them on January 6th, raising Christian flags and blowing shofars and praying as they stormed our Capitol. Even closer to the mainstream, the movement is attacking empathy itself. You may have noticed some of this. There's a book called Toxic Empathy that claims that compassion is a leftist trap. There's another book coming out called The Sin of Empathy. Vice President J.D. Vance, you may have seen, even twisted Catholic teaching, the practice of ordo ortis, or amoris. Got to practice my Latin. You love your family first, he said, and then you love your country, and then maybe if there's room, you love the rest of the world and take care of them. The Pope had a correction for him, which I'll talk about. But young people are seeing this hypocrisy, and they're walking away, and who can blame them? So for me, reclaiming scripture in this way is also a form of evangelism, helping people really understand the power of the gospel. So now is not the time to walk away from scripture in frustration and disgust. I know a lot of people have had to do that and have had to take a break from the church because there's been so much harm done. But this is actually our moment to reclaim faith, not as a weapon, but as a moral vision, and not to dominate, but to dignify people. A few of us were taught this, but many don't know that the creation story was not an attempt at science. They didn't have science back in that time. The creation story is actual moral defiance. In the ancient world, people believed that the universe was born through violence, that human beings were created from the blood of slain gods, and they were meant to serve as slaves. That was the prevailing belief. So think about what you know of the creation story, that into the world bursts a God who doesn't dominate, but delights in the creation, as a God that calls all of creation good, not once, but 6 or 7 times. It's a God that makes humanity in God's own image. This gives us a spiritual practice, and it's called restoring human dignity. To humanize others is to resist tyranny. And I saw that when I had the opportunity to go to McAllen, Texas, during the height of the separation crisis, child separation, with immigrants. And Sister Norma Pimentel runs a migrant respite center there along the border. They bring migrants who've been held in ICE detention center for weeks at a time. They've struggled to come, in, and they've been held. They're often sick and they're downtrodden, and it includes families and children. They come to her respite center to have a meal before they start their long journey to where they're going to settle in the country to await their trials. Many of them have ankle bracelets that they have to charge when they come to her center before they begin that journey. They have no idea where they are or what end is up. And so I was there standing with a couple of volunteers outside her center and had no idea what was going to happen, but a line of immigrants, about 100, came over. They were walking from where they'd been dropped off, and there was one child on his father's shoulders. And he was wilted over, almost as though he could teeter off at any moment. And I kept my eyes on that boy. He reminded me of my own son. As the immigrants approached the door, the volunteers in the crowd began to cheer, just loudly, and wouldn't stop. And that boy rose like a watered plant and smiled ear to ear. And then as I looked up, there was a motto above her door that said, "Restoring human dignity." And as those migrants filtered in, that's what was happening to them. They weren't just getting a meal and some directions and some health care. They were having their dignity restored. And that is the superpower that we have as people of faith. And we can bestow that dignity on each other and on anyone at any time. It took me years to hear these stories. I never heard the story of Shipra and Puah growing up. So often, important passages of Scripture have been ignored or missing. And in fact, in 1806, missionaries in Barbados brought the slave Bible. It cut out 90% of Hebrew Scriptures, especially the book of Exodus. Gone were the midwives. And this was to tame slave revolts, because slaves were reading that Bible and hearing that Bible, and they had to cut those pieces of the Bible out. That is the power of our Scripture. Christian nationalism is doing that again, trying to rewrite history, trying to baptize domination. And today, I think we have a moral responsibility to reclaim the hijacked text as the transformative text that it was meant to be. We saw the power of reclaiming our faith when Bishop Buddy, chose to preach that sermon to the president, to show mercy to those who were fearful. We saw the power of reclaiming text when Pope Francis instructed J.D. Vance that doctrine, that in his interpretation, rather, of that doctrine was wrong. Christian love doesn't stop at any border, it crosses it. That we're to live our lives through that parable of the Good Samaritan, where there's enough love to go around for all. Often, I think, and this was mentioned in the sermon this morning, sometimes we mainliners are reticent to claim our text and to bring it to public life. We've been taught kind of that that's not kosher or that's a little crass. And understandably, we want to respect the First Amendment. But in today's debate, it's important that we lift up what we truly believe because of Scripture, and we can do that while we honor all faiths and people who come from an ethical or secular tradition as well.